welcome to the AvCan podcast. I'm Carolyn Kempton, the communications manager here at Avalanche Canada, and I'll be your host for today. For today's episode, I'm joined by Colin Garritty, the lead field technician on our Vancouver Island field team, as well as an Avalanche forecaster. Colin's going to be talking to us about what the Vancouver Island field team does, why they're important to Avalanche forecasting, and how they can keep you updated on local conditions. Thanks for joining us, Colin.
Hey, thanks.
So to start us off, Colin, can you tell me why Avalanche Canada has field teams?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in most of our forecast regions, we actually already have a really good flow of avalanche and snowpack and weather data that comes to the forecasting team in Revelstoke through a system that's called the InfoX. It's an information exchange between all kinds of backcountry operators, whether they're ski hills or heli ski operations or Parks Canada, places like that. And they feed that data in so that the forecaster can put together an accurate forecast. So some of our forecast regions are actually really data sparse. There's a lack of professional operators, and the island's an example of this. So on the island, Mount Washington is actually our only InfoX subscriber. It's not really enough information to produce a forecast with. So we're stuck with, weather stations, more intermittent observations from the public, and it's just not enough for us to get a really good, accurate forecast day in, day out. So this is where the field teams come in. We essentially fill the role of the InfoX subscriber. But we can do a little bit more than just provide info to the forecaster. Since we're local to these areas, we build relationships with local stakeholders. We engage with the backcountry community, different media outlets, and essentially working to get folks on board with all of AvCan's products and messaging. And we also lead or take part in different outreach or educational events that push that part of our work forward.
Can you tell us about the area that your field team covers?
Yeah, we cover essentially Vancouver Island, roughly from Cowichan Lake down in the south to a bit north of Mount Cain. So it's really a massive forecast region. And quite a lot of it's pretty inaccessible, both for us as well as the public, especially for day trips. So we're really focused on areas where folks actually get out into avalanche terrain, which is typically those closer places like Mount Arrowsmith, Sutton Pass down in the south, the Beaufort Range, kind of west of the Comox Valley area, parts of Strathcona Park that we can get to in a day. A lot of the park's actually really tricky to get to because there's no motorized access and you're essentially climbing from valley bottom to get anywhere. We'll often kind of poke in at the edges of the park and move into it from places where we can get road access. And then there's the Boundary Range, which includes spots like Mount Adrian and Beadnell, really popular sledding destinations. The Gold River area, we're still trying to crack a few more destinations in that part of the world. It's a really good view into the western sub-region that we work with. The Prince of Wales Range is a really cool spot, kind of northeast corner of the island, also known as Kusum. Really scenic set of mountains in there. And then Mount Cain is a really key destination for us. A lot of backcountry access happens there. There's also a bunch of other smaller North Island spots that we're learning about that have a lot of potential, and we definitely do get some traffic. So that's pretty exciting. We have a ton of trips that we've kind of ID'd as having pretty decent traffic from people who get out there and good potential for getting observations. So there's still a lot more to explore on the island that we're excited to get into. We've also spent a bit of time getting to know the Powell River area across the water, which is kind of isolated kind of status feels more like a bit like an extension of the island scene than it is an extension of the sea to sky. So we're going to try to do a bunch more trips there and in the sea to sky as well, where we partner up with the SFU Avalanche research team for some field work in that part of the world.
How long has the Vancouver Island field team been up and running?
We're heading into our 4th season now.
Okay, so you're getting a good sense of where you need to go and where people are recreating.
Yeah, it felt like in our first season that we'd kind of hit all the major spots. And then in our second season, we discovered, oh no, there's a few more places that people are getting to. So we opened that up a little bit. And then really it seems like the more we learn about the island, the more we figure out that we still need to go explore.
Fun that exploring gets to be a big part of the job.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you and your team usually get around?
So we travel with a big truck loaded with a sled deck and a couple of sleds that have ski racks on them. So a typical day for us looks like driving out of our base and up to the snow line somewhere, which, as islanders know, can be really hit or miss here, where that snow line actually lies and where it's safe to travel with a truck. Then unloading our sleds and then hopefully on some form of snow so that we're not destroying them on the way up. And we cover as much additional elevation as we can with the sleds. And then we usually transition to ski touring to get that last bit of elevation. We're usually trying to get as high up as we possibly can to get alpine observations. So getting the alpine is a top priority, but it's not always possible here. Islanders know, access can be really tricky depending on conditions, whether it's road access, snow conditions, it can be really deep snow or really hard snow here, if you even call it snow sometimes. Visibility can be an impediment for sure, or like just straight rain can keep us at lower elevations too, or just unable to get places.
Right. So you have to be nimble.
Every day is a little bit different.
Can you walk me through a typical day in the field for your team?
Yeah. So we start our day with an assessment of the overnight weather and kind of figuring out whether or not we hit the mark with that part of the forecast, what we expected to happen overnight. Then we get into assessing different trip options. So trying to find a balance between what's going to help the forecaster, what's going to help the general public. So there's lots of overlap, of course, between those two goals. And then what will be physically possible based on the various restrictions like conditions, time constraints, and different hazards that might exist on a particular day. Then we submit our hazard forecast for the day to let the forecaster know kind of what we're at, where we're at, what we're thinking. And we might discuss our trip and goals or restrictions with them a bit so they know what we're planning. And if we want to know if they have any questions too, so we can answer those as best we can when we get out in the field.
So there's some back and forth with the forecasters.
Yeah, exactly. The next is our road access piece, which is always an adventure here since conditions vary so dramatically. I figure usually once the truck is parked, that's the hardest part of the day over right there. Then we get into our sled and ski access, which I've kind of described a bit. Quality field observations are really the target at this point, but we also have days where we'll go out and work on rescue skills or sled skills, figuring out new access points or doing some type of outreach. And we try to save those objectives for when conditions are pretty predictable and there's not too much riding on those field observations. And then when we're in the field and we kind of get the situation, we try to connect with the forecaster from the field to relay those observations in time for them to actually work them into the forecast before the end of the day, their published time. We might have a bit of time for a quick ski or sled around, make some media for sure to capture the condition story or another bit of avalanche education that the conditions are kind of lending themselves to. At that point, it's a 180 back to the truck, load everything back up and head home. And once we're back at the office, it's usually like a huge rush to finish off all those different communications pieces before the end of day timer goes off.
So we'll talk more about the communications pieces, but what kind of data are you gathering?
Yeah, so in the Avalanche world, we divide information into 3 different classes. Class 1 data is avalanche information. Really, nothing tells us about avalanche conditions quite like a new avalanche. So those observations are the most important. Our eyes are peeled for anything that looks like unstable snow that has moved in some way, whether it's a loose wet avalanche, a slab avalanche, or a cornice formation, those kinds of things, or cornice fall, those kinds of things. Class 2 data would be snowpack information. So we want to be able to describe the snowpack structure from the surface to the base of the snowpack and identify any critical avalanche layers that exist in the snowpack, as well as layers that could go in that direction toward being a critical avalanche layer with forecast weather, or any layers that have gone from being a critical avalanche layer to being irrelevant, which happens really quickly here. So yes, these kinds of changes happen super fast in a warm, stormy place like the island. So almost every day we can see really big changes in what's important about the snowpack structure and what isn't. So we really want to capture that. Then class 3 data is our weather info. So new snow, wind, and temperature are the main factors there. They, of course, tie very closely to the snowpack conditions, especially near the surface.
So then how do the avalanche forecasters at Avalanche Canada use that information you gather out in the field?
Part of that is those 3 information classes, class 1, 2, 3, which closely mirror the details section of the forecast. So if you look into the details, you'll see avalanche summary, snowpack summary, and weather, which are essentially those class 1, class 2, and class 3 data. So we help them get a handle on those pieces of information, but we also want to validate their thoughts on, do we have an avalanche problem and what is it? And if there's an avalanche problem, what kind of advice do you think will help Islanders deal with those conditions? And on the island, I think surface conditions are actually a really big one, more than maybe in some other parts of the world, because they change so quickly. They really reveal whether we have our finger on the pulse of conditions or not. Like, so if we don't know what the surface looks like and it's changed recently, like, you've kind of lost the plot quite quickly. Those surface conditions dictate whether new snow has like the potential to form much of a problem or not. They will determine how travel is going to be, whether it's like a hard crust or breakable crust that's unpleasant travel, or soft snow that's good skiing. The difference between those two conditions in terms of weather can be very subtle, but the difference in terms of how it will feel to somebody traveling in the snow is just massive. So sometimes the surface actually is the hazard. 5 centimeters of new snow on a bulletproof crust isn't really an avalanche problem. It's more of like a slide for life scenario. And we've seen that on the island too, where the crust can be really deadly.
What is unique about the Vancouver Island field team, Colin?
So I think actually it's mostly about what's unique about the island and what that means for how the team needs to adapt to the local situation here. So first of all, we have challenging access. I've kind of alluded to this a bit. So I'm a bit jealous of those field teams that can pull off the highway to their snow-filled parking lot and unload their sleds week in, week out, same parking lot, same snow. Just if only we could do that here. It's just very, very rare that we get to stage in the same location at the same destination. It's always changing. It keeps us on our toes, though, and makes for some adventurous days. I would say that, it's kind of funny. Like, all field teams have a plan B option available to set up in our trip plan form. We have a dispatch service that tracks us during the day, and so they want to know what our plan is for the day. And most teams, I don't think, really make use of that plan B. For us, since there's no plan C option, we've had to call in our plan C quite a few times. So things really quickly change here. We have one objective in mind and we end up on objective 3, not regularly, but often enough that it's remarkable for sure. Another one for sure, I would say, is our really unique backcountry community. Really cool group of people here. We've got everything from super hardcore sledders hitting secret stashes in big terrain, more chill sledders heading to cabins for some family time, a lot more low key, really like superhuman ski tourers completing massive multi-day objectives in really remote mountain ranges, a really active alpine climbing and even ice climbing group here. You wouldn't imagine that there's much ice climbing on the island, but when it comes in, people get after it here. And then we've got pretty low key and also very hardcore hikers and winter hikers and snowshoers that get out in all kinds of different ways and all kinds of different places. And lots of newer enthusiasts who are just getting started on their journey. And in some cases, not newer, but some of the lingering, maybe lackadaisical approach to avalanche safety that we've seen, resulting from maybe a lot of time spent in a maritime snowpack climate that we have here, which has a reputation, I would say undeserved, for being a forgiving snowpack climate, because it still has serious capacity to deal out deadly surprises. And another big difference for us, I would say, from other field teams would be sled skiing. Most other teams will pick either sled or skis for the day. We usually don't have that option. We need to use both.
This brings up an interesting point then. Social media is a big part of your job, and if you have so many user groups that you have to try to speak to, can you tell us a little bit about how you work social media ideas into your day and how you come up with compelling posts?
So it starts right from the morning meeting, the first thing in the morning. So unless there's a lot of uncertainty about the conditions or we're going to get shut down during our trip by something unexpected, we generally know, or we want to know, what we're aiming to accomplish before we head out the door, so we can pick that destination appropriately. We have a goal in mind. We'll usually have an idea of a couple ways things could go before leaving our base. If we don't get this story, we'll probably get this story. Or if we can't accomplish this, we'll probably be able to accomplish this. So we have those plan Bs and Cs in the social media side of things too. But for me, is in terms of like coming up with quality posts, I try to tap into the part of me that just wants to go out skiing or sledding for fun. And I want to have a conversation between the professional avalanche safety communicator in me and that person in me that wants to just go out and sledding and skiing. And I want to think of the best advice I could give that sledder skier to have a great day, and finding the best way to make that information resonate with the visual and narrative tools that we have with social media. In a way, I think we're lucky here because the community is usually really starved for access and conditions info for some of those reasons that I described, that constant change that we see here. And having the wrong assumptions about conditions, especially like surface conditions here, can really easily lead to an unsuccessful outing. So people are tuned in because if you're not, you're a step behind what's going on in terms of your ability to move around in the mountains. So sometimes our story is, go get after it, watch for this and that hazard, but it's good, just these are the things to keep an eye on. Other times it's more tentative, like this trip was not for the lighthearted. It was a hard one, and we want to make sure people know that it took a lot for us to pull it off, even with sleds. Or sometimes the stories we turned around with our tails between our legs. We saw big avalanches propagating far and we got the heck out of there. So I think that direct connection to current conditions and ideas for how to manage those conditions is what, for me, I think keeps folks engaged.
So, what can people expect from your social media accounts?
I think the big one is those up to the minute conditions info and our approach to managing conditions. I think that's the big one. But also, a lot of adventure. We have pretty exciting times sometimes, a bit of humor. We like to keep things kind of fun and lighthearted when the situation warrants it. Of course, some avalanche education pieces, safe mountain travel philosophical elements, and sometimes even some trip ideas, places you might not have checked out that could give you some ideas for where to go in the future.
So, field teams also go to outreach events, and it seems like you really make an effort to get to know the riders in your local areas. How important is that community outreach work for you?
On the island, I think it's actually really huge. Some know, some may not know that AvCan is actually on the island standing on the shoulders of giants in the island backcountry community because we're following up on the amazing history of the Vancouver Island Avalanche Center Society, or VIAX. So VIAX was volunteer run, and for this reason, established a very strong outreach program because they needed to. The most notable event for them was the Party for the Bulletin, but they also did local ski movie nights and other events in order to fund the forecasting program. So Islanders really got used to a robust outreach ethic from the local Avalanche Center. So when we got started here, really wanted to keep that spirit alive because meet those expectations of Islanders. And we've actually expanded the outreach a little bit. We're at Mount Cain Backcountry Fest every year. Really, that's the crown jewel, I would say, outreach event on the island. It's just awesome. So many backcountry enthusiasts show up there, and we do a really cool presentation, and we talk about the snowpack. It's different every season, but yeah, it's a really good one. Sometimes the same weekend, we'll squeeze in the North Island Snowmobile Association's Snoworama, which is an extremely long-standing, very well-attended event for local sledders. There are a lot of sledders on the island. We've seen up to 200 people at that event. We also connected with the Alpine Club of Canada and the Island Mountain Ramblers in our first season, kind of more hiking focus. We'd like to do some more stuff with them in the future too. And as well as there's some other hiking groups on the island that we have yet to connect with. So there's still some scope to expand there. And we've been doing events in Vancouver as well with MEC and Peak Performance, and we're going to keep those up too.
Sounds like you are very busy. What's your favorite part about working in the field?
For me, that whole element of discovering new places and kind of just off the beaten track, but places people go to, but maybe a little bit more hush hush, those are really exciting places for me to find. Otherwise, it's, on a good day, it's getting those hard to get alpine observations, getting the social story, ideally getting a sweet ski line in, and getting home on time. And it's hard to get all that done in a 10-hour day, but we do our best.
Sounds like the perfect day.
Yeah, it really is.
Colin, if listeners want to follow the Vancouver Island field team on social media, how do they find you?
I'd say the best spot would be our Instagram page, which is at avcan_Van Island. The posts that we make there get echoed to our Facebook page. So using Facebook works too. Sometimes we'll make separate stuff for Facebook, but usually we're composing on Instagram. Those socials are a bit of a mix of info and entertainment, kind of infotainment. So if you're interested in the more technical details, access information, and kind of the nitty gritty, definitely following the MIN or the Mountain Information Network on avalanche.ca. So just zoom in on the island and look for those blue dots. That's the ticket for that info. And I would say not just for our posts either. We get really, really high quality posts from our users. So for those posts as well.
Actually, something we didn't touch on. Do you make sure to post on the Min frequently throughout the season?
Yeah, absolutely. Every day that we're out, we're making a MIN to talk about conditions. I mean, unless we get totally skunked. Sometimes there are days when it just doesn't work out and we don't get anything of value in terms of snow or avalanche conditions to share with folks. So on those unfortunate days, we don't usually make them in post. But those are rare. Usually we're out there making a post every day.
Awesome. That's vital information to share. And do the field team members do exchanges?
Yeah, actually, we try to make a point to do that every season. There's a bit of a mixing around of field team members so that we all get a sense of what unique struggles the different teams deal with, different things that we've learned and can learn from each other to make our jobs easier and how we can do our jobs better. And yeah, it's just a great way to kind of like build solid rapport and connections with the other teams and with forecasters too. We'll get forecasters out so that you do know the forecaster that you're dealing with. It's so much easier to have a good conversation where you can exchange details and just have that good rapport to exchange info.
Who else is on the Vancouver Island field team?
We've got Karina Backer and Jarek Barwise, both also Mount Washington patrollers. Karina's also aspiring CARTA dog handler, Canadian Avalanche Rescue Dog Association. She's moving through that process successfully. Really, really exciting to see that happen. So we've had Nazco, the Avalanche dog, out on field trips a number of times, and it's been super rewarding to see Nazco and Karina go through that process. And Jarek, as I was mentioning, based also at Mount Washington for patrolling, and previously Jasper, Marmot Basin, doing patrol there. And he's newest on our team. Really excited to have him on the team as well.
What's your background, Colin?
So I've been at Avalanche Canada for, I think I'm into year 9, which is crazy. I can't believe it's been that many years. I started my first 5 years. I was a forecaster based in Revelstoke and doing a lot of roving field work. I did a lot of that, building weather stations and things like that, as well as, of course, forecasting. And then I'm also a ski guide, so Canadian Ski Guide Association certified, and I've worked with a number of different mechanized ski operators and still do. I guess I got my start way back in the day, 2007. I started patrolling at Whitewater Resort, which is in the Nelson area. Really fond memories and of just being like really new and excited to be a part of the Avalanche industry at that point.
Well, we're happy to have the Vancouver Island field team and all the field teams out there collecting data and being a big part of our program and what we do. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, Colin. It was a pleasure to learn more about what the Vancouver Island field team does all winter. Thanks for your hard work. Don't forget to check the forecast if you're heading out into the mountains. You can get it at avalanche.ca or the Avalanche Canada app. If you enjoyed this, find more episodes wherever you get your podcasts and share it with a friend. You can also join us throughout the season for our free webinar series. You can find a link to that on our website. If you have any questions or comments, please get in touch at communications@avalanche.ca. We would love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Have fun and stay safe.